We've been talking about Washington State's domestic violent extremism task force, which is a total farce, for a while now. I'm going to get into some video from the latest meeting, but I think it's important to set the stage so you understand why it's such a farce and why the only possible way to fix it is to simply disband it altogether. So, of course, Washington State has been the home of rampant left-wing extremism for a very long time. It's gotten substantially worse and more frequent over the last 10 to 15 years, in particular over the last 5 years. You have left-wingers who will assault, vandalize, burn, whatever it is in the name of the cause of the day. So it could have been BLM, so anti-cop animus, anti-big business animus, the Occupy movement, and now Israel and antisemitism. So, of course, last week we had a pretty high-profile instance of left-wing extremism, not that Democrats here will call it that, when you had a group of left-wing anti-Semites take over a building at the University of Washington. Thankfully, 30 or so of them were arrested. We'll wait and see whether there's any real consequences for those individuals, because to date they haven't faced real consequences for much of anything. But I'll tell you, they're still emboldened to continue this behavior. Our friend Ari Hoffman pointed out that the building that they had occupied last week has been vandalized again. And they say that they're going to continue vandalizing it. It says the radical group that did this said, continued attacks by students and community members will keep this building closed and unable to fulfill its genocidal purpose. Ah, yes, because the engineering building at UW has a genocidal purpose because Boeing in part funded it. Got it. So it continues. And why wouldn't it? And that's what I would say. Why wouldn't they continue to engage in this kind of behavior? The last time they engaged in this kind of behavior, last year, what happened? Well, the University of Washington rolled out the red carpet for them. They allowed these left-wing extremists to meet with important people at the university, and they negotiated with domestic terrorists. So, of course, if that's the reaction you've always gotten, and there's never been any real consequences for you for engaging in this kind of extremism, you're just going to continue to do it. So in a sense, I don't really blame them. I mean, I do, because they're radical nut jobs, but like we always go back to, if you give a mouse a cookie. So you just keep giving these extremist cookies, ignoring their behavior, rewarding their behavior, so they keep it up. And all of this is condoned from the top on down. So as we mentioned last week, Bob Ferguson, took him 48 hours to even speak out about the left-wing extremism, the governor of Washington State, even though it's his alma mater, finally was asked about it and just pussyfooted around the issue because he doesn't want, this is his base. And more, it's becoming the platform of the Democratic Party to engage in this sort of political violence. So Bob Ferguson, when he was Attorney General, launched a couple things. He launched a domestic violent extremism task force and a hate crime hotline. So he wanted to take it very seriously that, hey, we're going to deal with domestic violent extremism in the state of Washington and hate crimes and any sort of targeting of groups or individuals. So he made this his issue, right? It's like, we're not going to tolerate extremism in Washington State. And then he gives these really tepid responses when confronted with actual tangible acts of extremism. So on Friday of last week, after all this had happened at the University of Washington, Bob Ferguson's domestic violent extremism task force had a meeting. And I thought, well, surely they're going to address what happened at UW. Because in their last few meetings, we've been very vocal and other individuals have been very vocal. And I know people have been emailing the task force left and right, basically saying, how are you conducting a task force on extremism in our state and completely ignoring left-wing extremism? They focused almost singularly on right-wing white supremacist violence, which in Washington State, there is none. Maybe years and years and years ago, there's been a couple of scuffles here and there with the Proud Boys, but it's not up for debate. It's just a fact. There's far more left-wing extremism here than there is right-wing extremism. Yet they were singularly focused on like right-wing neo-Nazis, white supremacists, hate crimes against people of color, et cetera, et cetera. So we and others have been pointing out you cannot be taken seriously as a domestic violent extremism task force in a state like Washington if you don't seriously talk about what's happening with the left wing. So are they going to do it at this meeting? Well, in light of what happened at the UW last week, this task force gets together and now they want to say, well, that's not really our job to look into individual instances of extremism.
We're not investigating any specific individuals or groups here or labeling anybody. That's not our intention as a group.
Interesting. We're not getting into individual instances or labeling anyone. That's not our intention as a group, despite the fact that at the same meeting, a member was talking about the reason the task force started to begin with.
As a result of the January 6, 2021 attempted coup in our state capital and the issuance of a national terrorism advisory system bulletin due to the heightened threat environment we were facing at the time, posed by the same people, right-wing groups that attempted to take over.
Yeah, so now that they're being pressured to speak up about left-wing extremism, they're saying, well, that's not really our job. What is your job then? Because on all the meetings to date, you've been more than happy to call out individual groups as long as they're on the right, to label individual groups as long as they're on the right, to talk about and look into individual instances that have happened in the past as long as it was perpetrated by the right. But now that people are emailing you relentlessly saying, hey, are you ever going to talk about the left-wing extremism in Washington state? They're like, well, that's not really our job. What is your job? And in fact, they're taking things a step further. So it sounds like a lot of people have been emailing them. Like the pressure is on for the domestic violent extremism task force to actually fulfill its obligation or just disband. So keep doing that, by the way. So they, I think, are all flustered and hot and bothered by this. So now they're thinking about changing the mission statement on their charter to be more vague so they don't feel compelled to have to address individual timely instances of left-wing extremism.
There's been a suggestion to add language to make this group's work and intention clear and recognize the concerns that we've heard from the public about designations of extremists.
Yeah, and to make it more clear, to make it more vague so we aren't actually on the hook for calling out people who we agree with ideologically. And just in case it wasn't clear how much they hate you and they hate anyone on the right, there was a member who basically said, no, I don't think that we should change the charter because then we'd just be giving in to these right-wing lunatics.
I think the people we're trying to make happy are the people who have been flooding my inbox, which I'm not sure is even a productive task. I don't think there's anything short of disbanding this committee that we could do that would satisfy that group of people. So I'm actually going to make the suggestion that we had a good charter. And if we have to take this much time to figure out what we do, I think we're just going to wind up unnecessarily limiting ourselves. And we're still not going to please the people we're trying to please. So I'm going to suggest maybe we don't amend the charter and just leave it as it was.
Yeah, there's nothing that they can do to please you. Oh, I don't know. How about just be fair? How about just be honest about where the extremism is in our state is coming from? We're not asking for a lot. We're not asking for anything unreasonable. We're pointing out the fact that today there is active, ongoing left-wing extremism in our state that you, the extremism task force, continue to ignore in favor of focusing on national examples, some of them years in the past, of right-wing extremism. And we and others are emailing you to let you know that we have a problem with that we don't think that makes a lot of sense. And your response is to say, well, we just can't please these people. They ask too much. Or in the case of one of the task members, they would rather you just don't email them at all.
Please, I've got your message. You don't need to keep flooding my private and my business inboxes on this. We got it. We hear you. If you want to write a group letter and send it to the AG's office so that we get it, go ahead.
They just want you to shut up. They just want you to shut up, and they just want to continue to be able to focus on the reason Bob Ferguson created the group in the first place: right-wing or perceived right-wing extremism. And now that they're being pressured to focus on the left wing, they just are throwing their hands up and we don't even know what to do. Is this not the craziest thing ever? It gets crazier. So, of course, even after this very high-profile, nationally covered Trump administration investigating 31 arrest incident right in the backyard of the Domestic Violent Extremism Task Force, what do they spend more time talking about at this meeting on Friday? You guessed it. White supremacy and right-wing extremism.
And it might sound, I don't know, naive or Pollyannish to think we don't just need to arrest these folks, but consider what white supremacy has done over the last several decades. White supremacy as a movement in the United States, they made the strategic decision, generally speaking, to stop using violence to advance their cause and instead to use culture and politics. So if our adversary in this instance thinks that culture and politics are the way to achieve white supremacy in the United States, then maybe we need to think about culture and politics in a lower P kind of, what are the norms governing our society as the long-term solution to this issue, as opposed to more tactical counterterrorism sort of responses. The neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, the Unite the Right rally, is a really classic example of this idea of using culture to shape politics down the road. And there's been a lot of really good scholarship about it. And I think we need to use culture to shape nonviolence and inclusivity going forward.
Good God. They just can't help themselves. And again, I've never said that we can't talk about right-wing extremism. I've never said that we can't talk about white supremacy. I've just made the point ad nauseum that if you're the Washington State Domestic Violent Extremism Task Force, that should be about 1% of all the conversations you have at these meetings. And when other people point that out, you tell them to stop emailing you. And you want to change your charter to make it more vague so you don't have to talk about the things that are happening in your own backyard. And the taxpayers are footing the bill for this. How outrageous. That guy. So he's talking about white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, despite everything happening here. So there's a Jewish member of the task force who brings up what's happening on college campuses and wants him to talk about that specifically. This guy is so obsessed with talking about white supremacy, even when asked about a specific example of left-wing anti-Semitism happening in our own backyard, he, honest to God, and you'll have to watch it to believe it, he immediately turns it around to talk about white people attacking black and brown people.
I'm thinking about how the public is seeing what's happening on college campuses and seeing it more as like, well, it's free speech, versus a lot of the Jewish people will see kind of like take it and it's like, okay, someone is protecting us. And I'm speaking as a biased Jewish person, by the way, mom and Israeli. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, even when I do those programs, when I go to college campuses, I try to educate people and I try to bridge divide between even staff members, because I think that's where it starts with administration and staff, creating a dialogue where people are more educated and aware to the nuances and how what we're seeing right now is not just harming Jewish people, but it's really, there is a risk for radicalization. I wonder if you have any suggestions how not to preach the choir, but actually bridging divide and getting the word out there and showing people the risk that you're seeing and you're mentioning of the results of any type of binary type of thinking, us versus them, and how do we go there? What do we do?
Thank you. It's a great question. And Cynthia might be able to also comment on this, given the extensive work that Peril has done over the years before my arrival here on the intersection of anti-Semitism and other forms of hate and violence, because you're absolutely correct. Ideologies or sort of narratives like the Great Replacement theory, which are anti-Semitic theories, which result in the most lethal attack on the Black community in the United States in Buffalo, New York, which resulted in the most lethal attack on Latino Americans in a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory generating violence against Black and Latinos, as well as the most lethal attack on the Jewish population at the Tree of Life synagogue. So in Pittsburgh. So anti-Semitism is closely mapped. I'm sorry. Extremism is intersectional, and anti-Semitism is a conduit to other forms of hate and violence. And so educating communities about those intersections, I think, is quite important.
Oh my God. A Jewish person asks him about the left-wing anti-Semitism on college campuses. He immediately turns it around and says stuff like that is to blame for the right wing attacking Black people and Hispanic people. Oh my, can you play the end too of his answer again, Nicole? Just the end.
Extremism is intersectional, and anti-Semitism is a conduit to other forms of hate and violence. And so educating communities about those intersections, I think, is quite important.
You understand what he's saying there? Basically, okay, well, yeah, maybe we should inform communities and educate them on what's happening with anti-Semitism and tell them that that can lead to attacks on Black and brown communities, which we really care about. So, yeah, I guess we can talk about anti-Semitism, but as long as we talk about it in the context of it also leading to hate where minority groups we do care about, because Lord knows we don't care about Jewish people, where minority groups we do care about, like Black and brown people, are going to get attacked. That is wild. That is insane. And it really shouldn't come as a surprise, I guess, considering the task force, as we've talked about in the past, is full of left-wing ideologues. So they don't want to face the reality of what's happening. And also considering the task force was convened by Governor Bob Ferguson, who just last week, when he was asked about what happened at the University of Washington, said he didn't even know what the definition of domestic terrorism was.
Whether something meets the definition of domestic terrorism, I don't know exactly what that definition is.
Was the Attorney General for 12 years convened a domestic violent extremism task force where they talk about counterterrorism efforts. They talk about it in the context of it being terrorism. And when asked about an instance of domestic terrorism just last week in the largest city in the state he's the governor of, on the campus of his alma mater, he says, well, I don't really know what the definition of domestic terrorism is. These people are clowns. Absolute clowns. How do we get this message to more Washington voters so they can see what's happening here? It's insane. So all of this is happening. They're going to, I don't know, I hope they disband. I don't think they're going to, but they're really mad that you're sending them emails. So I would suggest continuing to send them emails and let them know that you're not going to let them off the hook for failing to address extremism on one side of the aisle.